All right, let's try this again. Hello, tell your friends, tell everybody what's going on. All right, because I had to restart because I think that there was some interweb issues. So I'm going to be going live today with, hold up, I want to make sure I get her last name right. Julissa Contreras. Yes, we're going to be talking about the moment, expanding on the moment, expanding on healing in this moment. All right, so she's a Dominicana from the Bronx, creator of YouTube hit Shit Spanish Girls Say. Yes, and creator of Ladies Who Bronche podcast. She's a writer, poet, actor, and founding member of the Middle Voice Theater Company. She's going to give us her perspective and some wisdom in this moment, through this moment. I'm going to see, let's see if she's on right now. Hold up. We're going to try to reconnect. Here we go.
Is this working?
There we go.
There we go.
Much better, I think.
But yeah, okay, great. But yeah, what we were saying before, the thing started acting up was like, there's a lot of learning that we are doing right now. And I think that for me, a lot of things have come up. First of all, it's like you said earlier, welcome to the revolution, right? Like, I think that
welcome to the revolution, people.
In our lifetime, we've seen a lot of moments where folks get excited and we're like, all right, is this the time we're really going to transform things and band together? And, I think that the power of our collective voice right now, for me, feels a lot louder than I've ever experienced. And so it's really like, I, even myself as a social justice warrior, am like preparing myself to be like, all right, guys, this is not a fire drill this time. This time
this is the drill.
We have the momentum to really make something happen here, and understanding that means a lot of things. It means a re-education to make sure that, I am representing both my group, as y'all can see back here, Yo soy Dominicana, right? And so like understanding like that there's a learning and an undoing that has to happen in my community, and holding ourselves accountable to that. And then at the same time, understanding that there is a unified force that is oppressing not just my group, but all groups across the board, and understanding, so what does that collective voice look like, and how do we stand in unison in those spaces? So it's a lot of learning and making sure we're coming correct. And sometimes we're very well intentioned and stuff, but everybody has a little bit to learn. And for me, like, the more you're open to loving yourself and self-growth, the more that when that learning moment pops up, it might catch you by surprise. You know what I mean? There are often times you're like, oh shit, I didn't realize I was problematic. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know.
I mean, I recently just, like we were talking about yesterday, this whole, the difference between abolition and reform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even just the inherent, like, kind of white supremacy that I kind of had in my mind, even just thinking that reform could be possible, no matter who was promoting it. You know what I mean? And it's not possible, is what I'm learning. And the more that I inundate myself in works of, abolitionists since the beginning of time, especially Black women, like, I just really am just, wow, okay, yeah, no, there's no such thing as reform for a system based off of white supremacy. There cannot be reform in that regard. So I've been very much schooled on that in the past, like 24 hours, even 48 hours, because I've always believed in abolition, of course, but I had this thing in my mind where it was like something that can come later on down the line, when it's like, we've been constantly in that conversation of, oh, well, later we'll get there, maybe. But it's like, no, now is the time to radically shift our mindset into like, no, what is possible? What is the world that we can imagine? And how can we grow to that world? Versus like, what are the different ways we can band-aid the situation on the way there?
And I think that that's one thing that I think we have to identify the power that we're standing in right now, which is, you know, back in the day, there were a lot more limits to the movement. And that's not to say that we've made it to where, let's say, Dr. King or any revolutionary, like, it's not that we've already accomplished it, but there's a difference, right? Like even the power of recording on a cell phone, for example, right? And capturing stories. So like, I think we really have to keep our boots to the ground and understand that like, we might not have everything at our disposal to snap our fingers and just make it happen, but certainly we have more tools than the people who came before us, and we have the wisdom of what they learned, right? And I think that that's where the value is in learning our history. So for example, like when people are talking a lot about the Black Panthers right now, there are still people in our own community who think that they were a violent group, for example.
Well, I mean, they were put on the terrorist watch list. So if you were a part
Exactly.
of like brainwashed America that was only ever getting your information or news, especially during that time specifically from that one source, from like a news channel, you know,
Yeah.
the media, whether liberal or, you know, conservative, whatever way you go with it, it's run by the same people. And they have a narrative, a very clear, succinct narrative that they are pushing no matter where you get your information from. So I think that's another thing about how amazing this moment is and different this moment is that we're keeping each other educated. We're sharing tools with one another. We're holding each other accountable in a public light, which happens to be online, which doesn't need to be a physical holding of accountability, which is quite interesting, I think.
Right, right. And just like the floods of information that's out there, like it's like that. And again, welcome to the revolution. The shit that we, excuse my language, I don't know if I can curse.
No,
but
please.
things.
Girl, my fans know. There's no such thing
But
as
you know,
filter here.
the way shit is going to hit the fan, and like when something impacts a fan, things splatter, right? The corners that we are going to have to explore and dismantle are going to be crazy. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a splatter. But that is the point, is that you rebuild. And like, yeah, rebuilding means there's cracks, right? And you will inevitably see those flaws, but you have to fill that in with the gold and decorate those scars and say, this is what we learned, right? We have to amplify that so we understand, so generations after us, right, can then level up as we have and have more tools, because we have to be honest about our history, both internally and with the forces who are against us, right? Like,
That is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like really looking at our history. I think that's where the dissonance comes from, and why we're even arguing whether or not, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement is a valid cause for everyone to get behind or not. I think it's the fact that that's a debate is thoroughly ingrained from our inability to look at the truth of our history. Yep. We were not taught the truth of our history. We were not taught the truth of or the depth of the pain and the shame that comes with what has been done to Black people in America. You know what I mean? And it's like, and we've been talking about it, even the nuance of that, of Latinos and or the Latinx community, because, you know, we want to separate ourselves from it, but in that separation, there's even a sort of supremacy, because there are Afro Latinos like yourself.
Yeah.
Like that is an intersection that is very much alive and real in the United States of America, in this melting pot of cultures that come from all over the world and present in all kinds of colors. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's like an intersectional battle in that overall battle for Black lives. You know what I mean? Because there are Black lives in all kinds of cultures besides just the descendants of the people who were brought here specifically as from chattel slavery, and specifically for the use of specifically as property. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's like that's an even another little layer of the nuance, to where we have to really dig in and heal and talk about the truth of all of the layers of the history, and how colonialism is like ingrained in our very practices.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for us to think about what we were taught and think about the language that was used and how things were framed. So when we were learning about how, you know, we had colonizers coming to Latin America, the Caribbean, all these places, like it was framed in a way that was adventurous and necessary for the beautiful growth of what would come to be the United States of America. But it wasn't taught from the perspective of like, hey, we existed in these spaces and we were doing our thing, and then here comes these here come these groups and oppress us, right? But the word oppression was not taught in that, like in the history lesson. When we were preparing for a test in history, we were not using those words.
Oh, manifest destiny.
Right, manifest
like,
destiny.
What destiny are you manifesting by taking land from people, bro?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly. And so then details get lost in that history, like, you know, depending on which academic you're asking, anywhere between 94 to 96% of African slaves from the slave trade were left in Latin America and the Caribbean. 94 to 96%. That means there's only 4 to 6% of that lineage that came here to the United States of America, right? And that is the African American race, right? And so, you know, when we understand these numbers, then that has to shake you in a way. So then it's like, so then where did all those people go? Where did they disperse? They didn't just stay in Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, by the way. You know what I mean? They went to other spots. That's Jamaica. This is, you know, all of these Caribbean islands. There's Black people in Mexico. You know what I mean? Like there's just such a spread, and it is just not the aspect with which we were taught. But understanding that is important.
Yeah.
The more you understand that they didn't teach you that because they didn't want you to have that information, the more you start to question the way in which other things have been communicated and taught to you.
100%. We also, you know, in this conversation of broader, to even include another layer of it, is the indigenous populations and how they were also enslaved, and they were also kind of put into this whole melting pot of this diaspora. You know, we are a mix of all that is, or that was, colonialism. You know what I mean? It was these European settlers coming in and bringing in human beings and exterminating human beings from a land that already existed and that had already had their cultures. So even when, you know, because I'm Cubana Americana, and my grandparents, both sides, my mom was born there, and I have, you know, all of that in me. You know, my ancestors are una mezcla of all of the above, like all of ours. You know, we're a diaspora of all of these things. And when we talk about, you know, these rights and these liberations, we're talking about the liberation of our own people. And I think that there's this divide when it comes to the racism that exists in the Latinx communities. Because there's also different layers of it and different levels of it. Because you know, in Cuba and in the Dominican Republic, you still have two different cultures, even if we are similar. You know what I mean? And then when you go to South America or Central America, you have a whole nother range of how indigenous communities and slave communities like all kind of mixed together and made their own valid cultures out of that. And we all profit off of those cultures that were created by the hands of slaves and indigenous. You know what I mean? We are the amalgamation of all of those things come to light, you know, especially white Latinos who love to claim this rich culture, you know.
Hello.
That rich culture comes from our roots. That comes from the history of the African influence over our cultures.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things, is to see how people really deny the black culture in the Latinx community. And I'm like, but same plátano, different recipes, motherfuckers, because the plátano stretches very wide and it leaves the Spanish tongue, okay? Right? El mismo plátano que nosotros nos gustamos acá, también los africanos cocinan ese plátano y lo comen, y nosotros lo aprendemos de eso. I'm saying it in Spanish because some folks are writing, say it in Spanish. Nosotros estamos hablando para lo que están...
Gente aquí que hablan español, que también están escuchando.
Oye, para lo que nosotros estamos hablando es que nosotros como una comunidad no tenemos la educación, y no porque no queremos, pero no nos dieron la educación para saber de dónde viene la familia de nosotros. Mira, mi español es roto, como dicen de los dominicanos. Yo hablo mi español roto. ¿Pero por qué es eso? Hasta eso tiene una historia, ¿verdad?
Hasta eso tiene una historia.
Todo eso es importante. Entonces estamos hablando que es importante de entender la historia negra entre los latinos, porque no es nada más la historia, vamos a suponer, en la República Dominicana, que los haitianos, que no lo queremos aquí, que sé yo cuánto. Óyeme, nosotros en esa isla querían hacer una isla negra poderosa, porque nosotros somos una raza negra. Después, cuando entró Trujillo, que ustedes saben que ya eso fue más de 30 años de qué, enseñándote algo que no era para tu bien, pero sino para mantener una raza negra baja, porque están siguiéndole los pasos, así como los Estados Unidos, y si ellos están viendo que en los Estados Unidos les funciona muy bien, que los negros lo tienen bajo y los americanos, tú sabes, muy arriba, entonces, ¿qué hacen?
Los blancos, porque también americano, ¿qué quiere decir? Porque hablamos de africano-americano, como si los africanos americanos serían parte separada de la cultura americana, o sea, pero si los africanos americanos son los que han hecho y han creído, o han creado,
sí.
Han creado la cultura americana, o sea, todo el mundo como que quiere ser africano, quieren ser eso, ok, eso es importante hablar de eso entre nuestras comunidades, porque hay mucho racismo.
Yes.
Y también de lo que está hablando Yulisa ahora, es eso, esta mentalidad de que somos separados, que la historia de los africanos americanos es diferente de la historia de los africanos cubanos o dominicanos o latinos en general. O sea, como si esa historia es algo aparte o como si ellos no son parte de esa historia. Aunque los africanos americanos, los negros que están aquí en América, ellos vinieron porque como propiedad, lo querían
acá. No fue voluntario, ellos no sacaron visa para llegar aquí, eso fue a la mala.
Exacto. Y también en eso, los latinos, nosotros cuando veníamos para acá, fue por decisión, fue porque queríamos crear una vida nueva para nuestra familia, para nuestra familiar, para nuestra generación o para los niños. Eso porque vinimos nosotros desde donde sea, en Sudamérica, en América Central, española, lo que sea. Todos veníamos a los Estados Unidos por decisión, no necesariamente porque nos trajeron acá. Eso es otro nivel de problema que tenemos que hablar, porque por esa razón, ellos no se creen que nos deben algo. No hay ningún que yo te debo algo en esa relación, porque para ellos tú tomaste la decisión de venir acá, así que si te jodes, te jodes, eso fue tu decisión. Right. Así que los derechos de los afrolatinos ni se habla de eso, ni se habla de que cuando estamos hablando de estos statistics, que también tiene que ver con los afrolatinos y también los latinos en general. Porque si te creen diferente de ellos, o sea, es el sistema que existe.
See, and I just to come back in for the folks who
right back to the English.
Like I think definitely what we're saying is that there is a way in which even the way in which we came here, you know, Dominicans, we come here and we get our visas to come to this country, but we're talking about a history of people who were enslaved and did not have a choice, right? And so like that basic understanding already changes the dynamics of their American experience when they get here, right? So you're talking about a group, and this comes, I'll frame this by saying, like, there's a way in which when we're having these tough conversations with each other, we have to be gentle, because, like, does it piss me off every time Dominicans who are Black deny their Blackness? Absolutely. Like, it makes me violent almost. I almost want to shake them and remind them, you know, of their history. But then I have to remember what? I have to remember that if it's somebody like a cousin who lives on the island, the access to information, the books that they're being taught in school, not the same as mine. Let's keep in mind that they were under dictatorship until the early 60s, which means people like my mother, you know, were still alive when a lot of this teaching was happening. And then years after that, the person who took power after Trujillo, Joaquín Balaguer, was a man who was his right-hand man. And so what happened was we changed the system, and it wasn't a dictatorship, but it was basically like putting a Trump in office after taking out a dictator from the United States, for example. And so what happens in the rhetoric, in the same way we're experiencing in America right now, that rhetoric was what folks were taught. And really it was quite dangerous to think anything else and to speak out. I mean, they were literally killing Black people and tracking Black people down. And so it was very difficult to be openly woke, right? And for a lot of folk where the priority was, well, I need to find food, or can my kids go to school? I mean, we're talking about a third world country. It becomes difficult to make your identity, in any case, black or light skin or whatever, it makes it difficult to make your identity the priority. So then what happens in a moment when everybody is like, you, this is who you are, remember who you are, blah, blah, blah. People are like, what are you even talking about? I've spent my life just trying to survive. What are you
spent my life
talking
trying to
about?
distance myself from the part of me that makes me a target.
Yes, yes. And so
that's
it's like,
the
that's a
most
survival
important part.
tactic.
When people don't claim their Afrocentricness or their Afroness, you know, it's not because they don't recognize that it's true, because there are plenty of things that we are told in microaggressive form, in passive aggressive form,
Yes,
in very direct form as a society. Okay, as a Latino community, there are many passive aggressive things, or just even simple like trying to marry lighter, or trying to have lighter kids, or trying to, you know, clean the race and all that kind of bullshit.
And
you know,
being
like
told,
grandparents.
I've heard people say, gosh, I have a list of these. I mean, like, I've heard people say things like, oh, bueno, si tú te vas a estar cortando con negro, aprende a hacer trenza, porque esos cabellos no son fácil. Meaning, like, oh, if you're going to be fucking a black guy, you better get ready and learn how to do braids, because that hair ain't easy, right? And like it's almost like a threat. It's almost like the blackness that you're associating with.
You better not bring that into your situation.
Yes. It is threatening your situation, right? It is threatening your ability to move through the world without being oppressed in a particular way, which is, again, why I'm saying it is important to be gentle, because what you are combating is somebody's survival tactic more so than a belief system. It's just if I'm not going to see change in my lifetime, how do I shut down and protect myself? Because I don't believe we're ever going to have the revolution. So leave me the fuck out of it. Don't talk to me about blackness. Don't talk to me about any of this. And so it is a survival tactic. So we have to understand that it's like you're educating people, and you're also saving people from this toxicity that one develops, and it is completely natural, and we've all done it. You know, I learned I was black at 19. I didn't know I was black. Like, I knew I was black, but because black people were like, oh no, you Spanish, right? And I was like, oh, you Spanish, which is actually where my the title for my video came from. Should Spanish girls say, I know the proper term is not Spanish. I am not from Spain. You know what I mean? I know that, but why did we do that? Because the colloquialism of New York City made it such that people were blanketed, and if you spoke Spanish, you were Spanish. But then I'd go into my Spanish corners, y las mexicanas weren't really fucking with me. You know what I mean? And like guatemaltecas weren't really fucking with me. And it was like hard. It was it became difficult because they also, in their own circle, were like, well, we don't really see black people.
Una separación.
So they started, so I'm being a ping pong ball between the black community and the Latinx community, and understanding, like, damn, but we eat the same plátano. Like, I always go back to that, and it's such a simple thing, but I'd always be like, it is so confusing to me how we're so different. And then I learned. And then it was such a relief. And that's why it's important to have these conversations, because people are relieved of pain when you talk about the difficult things. It's a difficult conversation, but that's part of the healing process. And healing hurts. Healing hurts. But you
don't take looking at yourself and looking at all of the spaces where you are imperfect.
Yep.
You know, and unfortunately, that's one of the biggest parts of all of this, especially again for the Latinx community, is that we need to look at ourselves before we can, you know, come around claiming this high and mighty energy, especially white Latinos, which I've noticed, like, a lot of people are pretty silent for the most part, white Latinos, like very silent, actually, as if our brothers and sisters aren't trapped in cages because of ICE, as if our parents, my parents, you know, when my grandparents first came to Miami, there were signs that literally said, no fucking Cubans, no Cubans here, no Cubans allowed, no Cubans welcome, right along with no Jews. You know what I mean? Like the Cuban people were refugees of a dictatorship. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, that's what we came over as. So for me to listen to any white Cubans talk about anything besides being on the side of Black Lives Matter, it's just absurd to me. And all of the different, you know, things that I've noticed, all of this trauma points right back to this need to be a model citizen, because again, we weren't brought here. We came here by choice. So there is an underlying guilt in that, where we have to be good Americans and we better show up and show out and be Americans. And America is so synonymous with racist, okay, that oftentimes, even when we're betraying our own communities, we are prepared to take up arms for our oppressors. Because it's not like my grandparents or my parents, even though we're white passing, had all the opportunity in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Había una tía aquí that claimed my grandparents. So, you know, she helped them out a little bit when they got here, but they had to start from scratch. You know, they worked as maintenance people and insurance sellers and teachers. You know, we're out here part of the middle class, the working class, you know. And granted, there's still so much privilege in that I've had to recognize and be very mindful of in my whole process of growing since I was 16, is that I look like a white person walking around the world, and I'm going to get treated like a white person, whether my prima is darker than me or not. You know what I mean? Like that's my experience in the world. But it's just as important for me to talk about these issues because of the Afro-Latinos that exist in the world, who are the backbone of our cultures, are the creators of our cultures, the hand makers of our cultures, you know, the fabric of the music, the fabric of the food, and the hospitable nature and the warmth, you know, that all comes from our Afro-Latinx family, you know? So it's just so important that when we're talking about this Black Lives Matter movement, we are talking about those lives. Those lives are part of that conversation. Yes. And they might not be the center focus of the conversation because, of course, Black American experience of those who were brought here has been a very particular experience in history of disgusting violence, you know, like just systemic violence that we have to just really reckon with right now in a way that I don't think we've ever even been given the capacity to, because we got no jobs, everyone's home, everyone's fucking freaking out because of a health crisis, and we're really we're looking at all of the different ways already, even before this started this came to light again, you know, is that we were all already in a state of like, what the fuck is going on? What is government for? What is our tax dollars for? If we cannot provide personal protection equipment for our frontline workers that were frontline workers a second ago, but are getting arrested now as protesters. Like,
right. And I always call that like people. I feel like people enter these movements at different points because people stay unwoke until they hit their trigger limit, right?
Or until something happens to them.
Right, exactly, which is just that. It is either too close and it's like close enough that it's a problem, or it fully happens to me and you're then thrown into it, right? Todo el mundo se despierta en diferentes puntos. A veces coge que algo te pase a ti para que tú entiendas lo que están sintiendo la otra gente. And it's really... It's scary because then that's what makes it difficult for us to unify, is that different people are on different pages at all times. And I think that you're absolutely right. Having coronavirus put people in a state of reflection, right? Because while it absolutely did disproportionately affect communities of color, as most things do, and we had to see that, we also had to see communities that usually hold a lot of privilege have to really maneuver things around to be able to have that privilege in a time where the universe was like, this is bigger than your money and what you can usually use as a resource. So now we have folks who are itching with that, and we're still in the virus, actually. Like, we're in these streets again, but the virus is still here. And so now what we're starting to see is people feeling the pressure of the anger and saying, holy shit, well, if I don't change something, I'm getting canceled, or there's going to be a shift. Like, people are feeling the pressure of that shift because we're angrier, we're hungrier for the change, because we've just been sitting in our house for months in a very unacceptable and insufficient situation.
It's also all really connected. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, when we talk about why coronavirus would disproportionately affect Black and brown communities, we never talk about why.
Yeah.
We get all these fucking stats thrown at our faces, and it's just like, oh, look, Black people it seems like they're getting sicker. It's like, can we talk about why? Because they're more likely to be part of the working class. They're more likely to be one of those people who's out there being an essential worker. They're more likely to first of all, live in a situation of poverty. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like disproportionately because of the history of this country
Right.
and our constant oppression of these communities and
Yep.
excessive policing of these communities. And every time they have historically thrived, literally people come in and bomb them or kill them or
Yep.
figure out a way to dismantle their socioeconomic standing that
Yep.
they have built for themselves. So
Yep.
every time that you see people come up, then you see them down. And I just saw a comment from some ignorant person talking about how if this whole country was racist, that there wouldn't be any famous Black people. Like, there's a continuous conversation. We really love to talk when we have these conversations about race. We really love to bring up, you know, these kind of token people who have been able to overcome their circumstance, right? Which is granted, like you can come across any race and you can do that, right? You can always find somebody who has overcome their circumstance.
Right.
But if we continue to make the story of one the proposed story of a whole, when there are very obvious obstacles that are legal, and most times, okay, that are the impediment of someone becoming successful, X, Y, Z, whatever way they become successful, okay? If you're not addressing those issues, like you're not looking at the larger picture.
Yep.
And that's the real problem, is that we're really not looking at the larger picture. We really want to focus in on, yeah, pero I don't like the looting and the rioting. I don't agree with the violence.
Yes.
It's like, how can you not agree with the violence and stand in support of systemic violence?
Right.
Right? So it's not just violence, it is systemic violence. It's violence perpetrated by people who are sworn to protect, or whose supposed job is to protect. What are they protecting? Yeah. If we cannot, as a collective, critically assess these kinds of institutions to when we have situations where they are very obviously murdering civilians.
Yep.
Let's take race out of it, right? Because people like to be like, what about black on black crime? And, you know, more police kill white people. Why are we justifying death with more death?
Right. And I think
is that? Like, it's bad. It's bad. All the way around, it's fucking bad.
It's bad, and then I go back to like the having to be gentle, because in that community, and I only bring it up because I think it's important to highlight, because we are the labels we wear and the titles the world give us, and then we are who we are. And in the police force and several armed forces, we have to consider our men and women of color that are in that space. And we have to really understand and unpack what it is that the experience is in that space that drives them to be in a position where, when they're facing someone in their community who is struggling for both of them, that they feel comfortable shoving a baton in their face. What brought them to that point, right? That is a very, very important thing. And so, like, for me, like, listen, growing up here in the South Bronx, the trial and tribulation would be one as such that, you know, we grow up in the South Bronx. It's hard out here. It's real hard in these streets. So what happens? I want to be an upstanding citizen. I want to get out of these circumstances. I want to help people also, because I see the struggle. I see a pathway to a career like police officers. And maybe I liked playing cops and robbers as a kid. Maybe there's something about just that line of work that calls to me, and it's coming from a very good place. Great. You know, I get into the system then takes their people and makes them unlearn certain things, and then injects new information. It tells them these are the people we target. Yeah, it brainwashes them. This is the people we need to target. This is why this is important. This is why you can get away with this low key. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all the things that we know that are the problems, but then they're taught that, and then they're told, and this is what you protect and serve. And then they're taught that in a way that we don't actually get taught that. So we don't even understand the depth of the brainwashing, you know what I mean? And so then they're in these systems, and for those who don't go to the sunken place, but are in the space, they say, fuck, well, this is terrible, but if I leave, who's going to change the system? So you have some who stay, and they're really trying to move up rather than move out because they're trying to do something. But then you have those who see the circumstances, are overwhelmed by the work ahead, and say, well, I got to take care of my family, and that's why I got into this shit in the first place. So peace out movement. I'm not going to move out. I am also going to try to move up, but it is now about me and my personal needs, and it is not considering the experiences of others. So I'm comfortable being out here and beating the shit out of people in the name of cops, because they're just out here making our jobs difficult, and that's all I care about in the end of the day. And understanding that, because we got to unpack that, we got to come for those people, we got to shake them up a bit and be like, yo, brother, you know what changes? Maybe if we win this movement, you get more mental health support, and you don't need to be stigmatized for trying to take advantage of it. Or, hey, y'all are severely underpaid. Talk about Black celebrities. Y'all are on the front lines every day, and who's advocating for you to get paid for that level of commitment, right? And like understanding that this is the same fight, and that if they do put their batons down, that perhaps we can move something together. Because imagine a world where all the police said nah. What are they going to do? Arrest all the police and all the people? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? It forces a change.
That was my whole entire thing. Is like, when we're talking about this all cops are bad cops situation, right? I think that there's a lot of sensitivity around this, because I know that there's a lot of minorities out there who have family members, who have brothers, sisters, aunts, cousins that are in the force, or either in the military or they're in the police force. And we want to, I think that's another thing that needs to be addressed, because like, even just talking to my dad, when he reflects on who it was growing up, right, in his high school that ended up becoming a cop, it was usually the people who were not on a path to do anything else with their lives.
Yeah.
Or they were engaging in a lot of criminal activity when they were younger, right? So you have this whole, and that's not to say that that's only minorities. That's a lot of the white men who go into these things. They go into these institutions knowing what they can get away with in those institutions, knowing that they're going to be protected by police unions if they commit hate crimes, knowing that they can exercise their egos to whatever degree they want, because they are above the law. They are considered above the law. And that's interesting to me too, is that dynamic of the people who are supposed to be upholding the law are somehow above the law. I feel like that is the biggest contradiction you could possibly be giving your people. Like, that is the biggest oxymoron that could ever be in existence, is a supposed institute that is going to be protecting people, that is allowed to murder, abuse, sexually assault, maim, do whatever they see fit, okay, for whatever circumstance, and they can literally justify it on the back end in their paperwork. And all DAs and all judges and all, because right now, I mean, this is very clearly like a sickness, and the sickness is not new. This is not new in any way, shape, or form. Like, this entire establishment came to be based off of slave patrols. And maintaining this, you know, whole law and order, you know, ideology that is somehow implying and constantly implying that human beings by nature are rowdy, chaos driven, and unable to govern themselves, right? And unable to hold themselves accountable, unable to hold their neighbors accountable, you know? And we never ever address the underlying reasons as to why someone would be incapable of that. You know, when you take resources away from communities, when you do not invest in schools, when you have juvenile detentions where you're supposed to be teaching children consequence by locking them in cages, when you have legally funded detention centers that are concentration camps, when you have all of these things, when you're not investing in small businesses, and you're not investing in the well-being of a community at large, and you're constantly actually doing the opposite and divesting from them and infesting you know, trouble, like even just the criminalization of drugs. Like, imagine if we did not criminalize drugs, and we treated drug addiction as a public health issue, as it should be, because drug addiction is a response, very obviously, to lack of resource. To the feeling of inadequacy, to feeling of unworthiness in a society where we literally make people's worth based off of their productivity. And if you do not give somebody opportunity, they cannot possibly give you back productivity. If you don't have an input, you can't have an output. And we all know that because of all the technology we be using on a regular basis. So if you don't have an input of resource and investment, you cannot possibly have an output of a law-abiding citizen. You know what I mean? People are gonna fucking survive, whether you like it or not. They're gonna figure out a way to survive, and that is the core issue. And that's why when we're talking about defunding the police and we talk about care not cops, We're talking about reinvesting these hundreds of millions and billions of
Yes.
dollars of our taxpayer money, okay, including these communities, because every single person in these communities of color or Black communities, they are tax-paying citizens, just like us. They work their jobs and they pay their motherfucking taxes. So guess what? They deserve their rights to that money. They deserve to have their communities invested in. And we all deserve to, first of all, I think first and foremost, the baseline here is the lack of education, the lack of access to the truth, the real truth, not the white supremacist written history version of the truth.
Yep. I everything you said and more. And I just like, I think that learning all of that is just the beginning of the work. And that is important to note, right? That if people begin to grow weary because they're like, oh man, this is so overwhelming, we're never going to get anywhere. Wait a minute, because the ride it hasn't even started yet. This is just, you know what I mean?
We're just checking to make sure our seatbelts are on.
Right, like they're still doing the seat check.
You got that bar down?
Right, like,
that's,
you know, they coming down, like, you know, you got to make sure, because it is what is ahead is really something that's going, we are literally pivoting an entire hegemonic mindset. I mean, we are literally changing the minds of millions of people, and we're trying to do it all at once, and that is a very heavy task. So, your camera.
Lauren. No way. Is it paused again?
Yeah. Yeah,
it's paused. Some crazy ass face.
It's not a crazy face, but you look real serious, like you really seriously.
Like I'm really got a point. I got a point to make.
Right, like you're listening. You're definitely taking in my words in it's understanding that the work comes ahead. And
how are we doing? Am I back?
No,
I'm still not back. Oh my God, I'm literally in the same exact space that I've been in all day.
Do you want to hop on and off?
No, because then we're gonna lose the whole live. I can't.
Oh, you're right.
We have like 10 minutes left, so I'd rather. Hold on. Let me just try to see if I can find a more reasonable space. How are we doing now? How about now?
It's
like
still
that T-Mobile commercial where it's like, can you hear me now?
Yeah, the can you hear me now commercials.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's still, you still have it.
It's still paused for real?
Yeah, it's still paused.
Oh my God, I'm so upset. No. Hold on, let me.
The people want to see
your face, girl. Try it again. Hello.
This is, you know, when you spit too much truth, Instagram acts up. When you're spitting way too much truth, Instagram always
that is the facts of life.
Okay.
That is so real. I've also noticed like engagement goes down, like for some reason.
Yep.
Even if people are definitely wanting the vibes. Okay, can you see me now?
I know.
Coño. All right. Well, hold up. I'm gonna save this live and I'm gonna post it, but then I'm gonna restart again. So I'm gonna post this and then we'll keep going and then I'll post that again. All right. I'm back. I posted the first one. I apologize for the internet's acting up. Hopefully what I was seeing was what was posted, but if not, it's okay. We're going into part 2 of this conversation. I think this is a conversation that we're probably gonna have to keep having too, to be honest, because there's so many layers to it. There's so much to talk about. So much to unpack. So we're gonna keep getting into it. All right, let's go. Julissa! Waiting on you.
Yes.
Here I am.
Yes. So much to talk about and sing about and, like, you know, express ourselves in several ways. No, for real. I really think that this is such an awesome moment in time.
I've been writing like crazy.
Yeah, I just started, like, I'm like halfway through a spoken word that I started writing, and I'm like, damn, like, you know, like the words are coming because the spirit is
working.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment in time, and we're gonna see a lot of art. I mean, I think one thing, like, in a weird way, like when we're trying to stand in gratitude in the middle of all this chaos, I think something to be grateful for is the way in which people have found their voices and
Channel.
are just expressing them in so many multitudes of ways and touching so many different audiences that it warms my heart. Like, you know what I mean, to know that everybody has a voice of someone who's willing to speak. And like conversations like these, right? Like I'm a voice, and I'm like, you know, a Bronx Latina, but like, you know, Miami, right? Like Miami can hear me and the Bronx needs to hear you, right? And like just like the ways in which we're finding these intersections. And what I was gonna say before we went off the live is that another huge intersection that I want to shout out that I think our communities need to sort of do the work for, to show up for, is the LGBTQAI plus community.
Oh my God.
We need to start showing up for them in a way that we haven't been. And I know that that's a tough one, right? Because that really taps on people's beliefs in a very specific way. And I get it. I understand. I grew up in a Christian household, and I've heard all the reasons and all the stories as to why. I know. But guys, it's an old mentality, and we need to understand where our scriptures have been co-opted from, because it is not that scripture and believing in things are not worthy.
Like Jesus is not our savior.
Yeah, like, you know, I'm not anti-religion or belief in any sort of way, but it's about understanding how the stories were passed down. We've all played the telephone game. We know how that happens, and we need to understand that in some cases it was intentional, the ways that the words were distorted. Our connection to spirit is ours, and it lives within us, and it has nothing to do with the construct. But there's nothing wrong with following a system that feels right for you and how you want to, you know, have that relationship, essentially. You know what I mean? And we need to dismantle that, because if that's at the core of why we think it's okay that people like Ayanna Dior, who got beat up by 30 men in a store, or Tony McDade, who got killed right around the same time as George Floyd, and no one is saying his name, you know what I mean? He's our trans brother. We need to be there to support each other, and that work is important. And like, you know, listen, as a cis woman, it is important for me to show up, because I have brothers and sisters in my community who need me to show up, who show up for me.
Amen.
Who show up for me. And so like that is so important. And it's Pride Month, guys. Like, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted to say, oh, we can't celebrate Pride. We celebrate Pride because Stonewall was a riot led by Marsha.
A black
Johnson,
trans
was
woman.
A
black trans woman, Marsha.
You know
Johnson,
what I mean? Like,
we
started that. That is our history. We are that. We are that fly, bro. We're at the forefront of so many movements. We as Black people are that fly. That image that we see of like the Black Power fist at the Olympics, that's a Cubano man. That's an Afro-Cubano man. And it's an image that we only circulate in the Black community. That is a Cubano man. You understand? Like, it is important that we understand the associations and the intersections, but it has to also include the LGBTQAI plus community. It cannot just be, oh, you know, Afro-Latinos are also Latinos. It goes past that. It is time. We are in a revolution. No more of the bullshit. It is time to cut the shit. It is time to call people out. And let me tell you something. I always say, pay attention to the corporations, because this is a capitalist society. When you see corporations scattering like fucking roaches because they are scared to lose your dollar, understand your power. Understand your power in that movement. You have to understand your power, and we have to shift the ways in which we circulate our energy. Going back to what you were saying, there's not giving us a lot of input, but we sure as hell give them a lot of output. Output is your dollar. It's your dollar, sweetie. Like, where do you invest it? You're mad they burned down a Target. Oh, you're mad about that, but you're not supporting the small business in your community. But then you're also mad they looted it, but you're not about to go shop there once Target's open again, are you? You have to understand, you know what I mean? Like, the ways in which you have to show up.
The power that we have as a community. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you on the message of, in all of these conversations, the intersection of, you know, LGBTQIA plus communities visibility is pertinent, because there is no liberation without everyone's liberation. That is just a fact of life. You can't and this is again like one of the many ways that I was schooled about like the reform, like trying to go with the reform angle of things, is like, you can't take baby steps towards people's freedom. You can't take baby steps towards understanding that we are all worth, at the very least, we are worth understanding that each one of us life is worthy. You know, we all are meant to be alive simply because we are alive. We are taking up the space we are and breathing. There's no extra explanation for it. Like, that's why we deserve it. It's because we're here and we're alive. Like,
and they're so lucky that we are just looking for equal rights and that we're not looking for revenge. Let me make that very clear.
Oh, what is her last name? I think Johnson. I don't want to misspeak, but I saw this beautiful Black woman who was really proclaiming, like, she spoke for like 6 minutes about this exact thing. She's like, you're lucky that, like, we're looking for equality and that we're not looking for revenge. And that is the truth beyond truth. And I think that at the end of the day is at the real core as to why white people are refusing to look at this moment, are the ones that are refusing to look at this moment and not grow. It's not because you don't see it. It's not because you think it doesn't exist. It's because you're scared as fucking hell that you're going to be put in the position that Black people have been in for the past 400 years.
Yep.
That's at the root of all of these issues is the envy. At the root of all of these issues is the fear of, shit, am I gonna get treated the way that am I gonna get what I've been dishing out?
Right.
Am I going to have to reap what I sow? That's the real issue, and that is what people need to be sitting with right now, in that comfortability that we're all experiencing. When we get confronted with these things, we really need to be looking deep down inside. It's like, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Is it because what they're telling me isn't true? Is it because what they're telling me is too much or in a weird tone or too aggressive or whatever? Like, no, bitch, like, that's not what the problem is. Like, it's not the tone, it's not the way it's being told to you, it's not the fact that you have to look it up on your own and that Black people cannot be doing this extra fucking emotional labor work for you.
Hello.
And having to explain things to you. There are resources upon resources upon resources out there for us to look at and to read.
Yeah.
We have to take the initiative if we truly mean to be taking initiative. We have to make the move to be better for ourselves and have these uncomfortable conversations with our family members and have these uncomfortable conversations with our neighbors and our sisters and our cousins and whoever the hell else has the audacity to still not believe in human life. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, we're above that. Yeah. And it sucks because I feel like a lot of Black people are being put in a position where they have to be nice about whether or not they're going to educate somebody about what they've been fucking screaming at the top of their lungs for I don't even know how long. Forever. You know what I mean? It's not their responsibility, and we have to just come to terms with that. And we cannot police the way that they tell us that. Like we need to take the policia out of our own minds and heads and hearts. Like that little white supremacist that lives in each of our hearts that shames us when we haven't done enough, or shames us when we're not productive enough, or shames us because we were wrong. Like, we really need to get over that little bitch, and we really need to get acquainted with our higher selves and the people that we're meant to become, because they don't have time for the petty, like, self-sorry bullshit right now. Right. You have to take yourself out of the equation, and you really have to look at, how have I been complicit in these systems? What am I doing from my corner of the earth, from my body, to make this world a more progressive place and to make this place safer for my Black brothers and sisters across the board, and folks, non-binary folks as well. Right. And our trans brothers and sisters. Like, everyone is included in the conversation because we're all human beings. Right. We're all little humans.
It's really that, and it's we gotta keep finding that language. I'm gonna say it again. We have to keep finding the language to have these conversations. And you're absolutely right about how people are. There's a lot of performative activism right now.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of people, like, I love my friends, but I have a lot of my white friends who feel the need to reach out to me to, one, make sure I'm good, which I'm okay with that. Thank you for checking in on me. But number two, then list all the things that they've done. Almost like, and then here's my list. So I'm not on the naughty list, right? Because I signed this petition and I know
it's that guilt. It's that intrinsic guilt that it's like, am I doing enough? Like, am I approved of is this enough for me to prove that I love you? Right. You know, and if the proof comes in the consistent showing up.
Exactly.
And this is a consistent battle. This is not one that stops. Because I have been having these conversations and in conversation with a lot of grassroots organizers for years. You know what I mean? Like, they've been doing this work. People have been doing this work. This work has been written. They've been doing the seminars and the lectures and all of that. That is in existence, and it's tangible things that you could, like, Rachel Cargill's amazing. She does a lot of work with healing our bullshit. Instead of, and of course her focus is her own community, but she does a lot of work with white people who really want to be allies in this situation. Yep. And I think the main thing about allyship is understanding that it's not performative. It's not just you posting one black square.
Exactly.
Because I have a lot of people in my life who I called out for posting a black square only,
Right.
And a lot of people got really upset about that because they're like, I'm trying, I'm doing what I can. And it's like, no, you're not.
Right.
Just you're not. And I don't mean to be rude about it. I don't mean to make you feel sad and then you feel discouraged and not even want to try. Yeah. This is a point where we need to stop being toddlers. Mm-hmm. A lot of us are toddlers right now. We are walking through this new world of wool past our eyes, like, whoa, like, wow, right. This is really fucked up for people of color, man. Like, wow, this is really fucked up. Yeah. And of course there's an intrinsic guilt that comes with that. You know what I mean? Of course you're going to feel bad about that. Of course you're going to feel probably really heightenedly bad about your own role in that. And how many times you're coming to the realization you've been a part of the problem. Right. But all of that guilt needs to be transmuted into action. That's the main thing right now that I think everyone's asking for across the board is like, if you really want to be better and you want to show up better, it's like, I'm not going to like pardon your past and like, it's okay that you were racist because it's never going to be okay. But it is something that we were indoctrinated with. And so you can do the work to be better. And you can't get lost in the self-pity. You really need to get a grip on your strength, on your courage, on your bravery to be on the right side of history for once, and to heal the intergenerational trauma of your ancestors and whatever your ancestors might have possibly done to Black people over the course of our history, or to their Black relatives or to their Black, community members. But there's a lot of pain that has been done. And of course it's not stuff that can be undone, but it's stuff that can be worked on to heal,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one other point that I want to drive home is we have to change the narrative about thinking that, oh, well, there's all the Black people who don't care themselves and they decide to, sit down and wait for government checks to come in and even though the highest number of people on welfare are white, by the way, if y'all didn't know that fact.
But can you repeat that stat for the people, please?
Yeah, the majority of the people in the United States who receive welfare and benefits from the government are white people, because we forget that we have a whole rural white America. We have a lot of these folks, and a lot of them are within the Trump supporting community, and they're having a completely different experience that we are in our own poverty and experiencing that, are so disconnected from that. That's another unlearning. I mean, I'm not even gonna go there.
That's a whole nother lesson.
That is its own fucking clusterfuck. And guess what, white people, instead of trying to rush here and trying to look good for me, go work on those people. Because the same way you want to point out our crack epidemics or our gang problems, and the same way you want to point that out,
we gotta talk about meth.
Go look at your own motherfucking people. You have issues that you need to focus on too. And by the way, a lot of the shit I have to deal with is because y'all motherfuckers, wouldn't leave us alone, or like Reverend Sharpton said, because you had your knee on our neck, right? And so that is why we have extra shit to work on. So please go work in your corner. Let me work in my corner. Stop trying to get a little stamp of approval so that you can say, well, that one Black girl in my life said what I'm doing is enough. Fuck the one Black person or two Black people in your life. We're talking about an entire community, an entire movement. And if that one Black person also doesn't understand the depth of their movement, then it's not their job to cover all those bases for you. You need to meet all the Black people at all of the intersections to do the work. It is your job. And it has been in your face. And I feel like a lot of people, the hard part is going to be looking back at their lives and thinking about all the moments where they saw that shit and they turned away. And listen, not every Black person is going to be there to call you out, but it's your job to sit with the truth of what you know about how you've behaved or have not behaved. Because guess what? George Floyd's death is not any more or less horrendous than all of the deaths that have happened in 2020 alone, in 2019 alone. I mean, you want to go back to 1619. It is not the worst. The only reason that it is that we are this passionate is because we are in a moment in time where we have the power to make enough. And if we slow the fuck down and if we stay tied to our fears, because at the end of the day, I have a spiritual advisor. She always says fear is false evidence appearing as real. right? False evidence as appearing real. Her name is Readings by Vida. Incredible woman, right? But that is so true. It is false evidence appearing real. And so we have to understand what is the truth. What is the truth? And if you're afraid of the truth, then understand that and own where you're staying stagnant. Because I'm fine with people who are like, you can talk me to death, Julissa. I don't give a fuck. My life is my life. And I believe what I believe. That's fine. Understand you are making a choice to be stagnant. And I won't even call it right or wrong, but the consequences will be what they are, period. And you have to deal with that. So ownership.
You better speak to them.
Ownership. You know,
Yes.
I'm tired, girl. I'm tired of this. I've been to literally my first job.
I can't even imagine.
I've not been unemployed since the age of 14. My first job was at my local council person's office because I was like, oh, that's an opportunity. We need to fix where we're at. We've always needed to fix where we're at. We didn't need police to be killing us to know that we needed to fix where we've been at.
Amen.
This is bigger than George Floyd. Stop hopping off the activism train because you think it's not your community. It is this country's revolution right now because the United States is a Black country because Black people built it. Okay? So this is our history. It's not just Black history. We're living in American history right now.
Honestly, when people complain about like the property being destroyed, I laugh. I really do.
Laughable.
I laugh because I'm like, how, that's not even like, first of all, we're on native territory.
Right.
You have literally put natives onto reservations.
Yeah.
And told them that that's the only space that they're allowed to have, even though this whole entire space was theirs. And we violate their treaties to this day. And you want to talk about property?
Yeah.
You want to talk about what's owned and what is not owned? Or what is earned and what is not earned? Or what is deserved and what is not deserved?
Okay.
We can get into those conversations, but they're pretty deep. And I don't think a lot of people want to hear the truth.
Yeah, girl. Let me tell you, they'll knock us off of Instagram so fast.
So fast, these settler colonizers.
Yeah, you know, and it's not, I'm sorry I got passionate. I'm not yelling like child. That's love.
Do not
that's
apologize.
That's harsh love.
Don't apologize for your
Feel me?
passion, mama. Like, that's another thing. Like, be as passionate as you are. Use your full capacity of your voice. That's what was given to you, for sure.
Yeah. Girl,
you deserve to be, first of all, enraged, if that's how you feel. Be fucking enraged. You feel passionate, you feel triste, you feel whatever you feel all of the feels, you know?
Yeah.
That's
and
another
I'm
thing.
like,
You need to stop policing Black women, especially about how the fuck they express themselves or or what they've been through. Like, that is not our place to say anything about whether or not we like the palpability of their words. Like, that is not our place. We need to just listen, actually. And granted, if you feel like you're being talked at, if you feel like you're being talked to, you need to sit with why you feel that way.
Right.
That's probably that anger that you're feeling towards you is not anger towards you. It's anger towards a very it's a blanket statement at this point. Yeah. So if it pertains to you and it affects you to where you feel called out by the energy at which this person is speaking, then you've got work to do.
It always goes back to us. Everything goes back. We are just spirits having a human experience at the end of the day. We are just spirits having a human experience, and our spirits have lived several lives. And all that wisdom, and every time your intuition speaks at you, it's not just the moment of now, it's the history of back then, when, and that spirit saying, we did this already. We did this already.
Speak up. Stop repeating this shit.
And when you ignore it, it never feels good. Let me tell you something. All the people in our community who are like feeling too afraid to move, that shit doesn't feel good. But you know what? The system knows that. And the system is so glad to have the people who step out of line and have all that stuff, because it makes it difficult for us to build up from where we're at. But like, you're all you got, guys. You got to really step into yourself and demand the truth of the spaces you occupy. Demand them to respect the way in which you guys enter these spaces. We can no longer conform to something that was never meant to serve us. There is 1% of our population that has all the wealth. 1% of our population has all of the wealth. And we are the ones who cry, fight, and kill each other, trying to get money that is never coming down. And
trying to get resources.
We're not holding it. It's not between us. I'm fighting you. You're not the one holding my bag. They're holding my bag. And if I'm upset and I feel defensive because the world I'm trying to protect is one that I built with my blood, sweat, and tears, right? And I don't want you to destroy that. I have to understand that when you destroy that, there's a reason and a circumstance that put you in the position to have to do that, because why would you otherwise? Nobody just does it for fun. That's a false narrative. No one misbehaves and commits looting and crimes just for fun. It is out of necessity.
Ooh,
And they
except
feel
white
like
people.
it's necessary.
Except white people. I'm sorry, because I have seen a lot of white people cause a lot of destruction because
Right.
they fucking feel
Because,
like it.
and you know what? And even
Because
that has
their
a reason.
feelings
Because they
drove them
don't know how to articulate themselves. Because even that has a reason. Because the only reason they know how to loot and break windows and do that shit is because they don't know how to have a strong voice. And so what they do is break shit. It is still an expression. It is wrong, and I don't agree with it. But even that is an expression. Right? And why is that the expression of those people? Because even though they're fucking white, they have been put down the thumb of people who have not given them the articulation and the resources to really express themselves. We're
That's
all
the huge
fucking oppressed
thing
here.
Yeah, I think even just like when we talk about like the patriarchy, because that's the core root of all of this too, because you know women are second class citizens to men before all of the race issues come into play, right? If we're just doing, and that's if they like if you're femme passing as well, because I want to even talk about like the census, for example.
Oof.
I was filling out the census, and I just want to talk about how terrible it is. Like, just
It's
the
shitty, right?
It's disgusting. It's, first of all, super heteronormative. You could only pick between two sexes. They only have male or female. You can't even click other to fill in whatever. They just don't have it. So that's the first issue I had with it. Second issue I had was the next question was about my Hispanic origin.
Yes.
Okay. Whether I was Hispanic, Latino, or Spaniard was the question. Yeah. The options were, no, I am not Hispanic, Latino, or Spaniard, right? That was the first question. The second question was, yes, I am Mexican, Mexican-American, or Chicano. Those were the three options of that option. The third option was, yes, I'm Puerto Rican. The fourth was, yes, I'm Cuban. And then the last option, okay, I'm going to say this. The last option was, yes, I am of Hispanic, Latino, Spanish descent. And then you had to fill in other, and the examples were like Dominican, Panamanian, for just all of the others, quote unquote, right? So I was like, my Hispanic origin. I was like, I mean, I'm Cuban, like for sure I'm Cuban, but I was born in Miami. I don't even have that option. I don't have Cuban American. It's not an option. There's Mexican American is an option, but Cuban American is not, or Puerto Rican American is not. Dominican isn't even on there. That shit is fucking wild to me. Like, I had to click both. I had to click, yes, I'm Cuban, and yes, I am Cuban, and I had to write in Cuban American because I didn't even know what the fuck to pick. I didn't know what was real. And then here's the kicker. The next part that comes up is, what is my race? After asking me my Hispanic origin, they asked me, what is my race? Yeah. And there's no Hispanic option. There's no Latino option. Yeah. There is white, which is when it's described, it says Irish, English, Swiss, whatever, like European white. And then they have Egyptian in there, which I was like, Egyptian North Africa, you fucking weirdos. Like, how is Egyptian white? And yes, of course, there's some white Arabs, but like, or Egyptians, excuse me, that's not the same thing. But I was literally like, what? It make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. And so that was the white option was one, and then black is another option. And then they have Pacific Islander, they have, Chinese, they have Japanese, they have quite a few breakdowns of different Asians, like in major categories. But like, I was just flabbergasted. I was like, first of all, I can't even pick any of these things because I don't identify with any of these things at all. Right? So I click white, but then I wrote in, my skin is white, if that's what you mean, ... in the comment section. And then at the end, I clicked other, and I put Cuban American again, because that's what the fuck I am. I'm Cuban American. I don't know. Why do we even have that category? And what government issued things are you using that quote unquote data for that doesn't have? Because another thing is like this information can't be used against you, right? But what if I'm undocumented? Yes, it can be used against me, and yes, it will be used against me. That's a fucking lie.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because they say that a lot of those demographic points are taken because that's how they put money in your communities, and then they can like really identify what the populations are that are in certain groups.
Exactly. Which I'm like, decides how much money is going into your communities or whether you're going to get supported or not. And actually, on the back end, that allows for your mayor to know exactly what color or what quote unquote race everyone or Hispanic origin everyone in all of these different communities come from. Because for the Miami census, it was Hispanic origin was a category of itself. So that
Mm-hmm.
means they understand how dense of a demographic they have,
Right.
that is Hispanic or quote unquote Latino or whatever the hell, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that that's its own singular thing to pick, but then when you go to the race category, we have no options, I think is just wild.
Yeah, it's weird. And
Fucking
like,
wild.
and there's like, and I encourage folks to definitely like look up the history of the census and like how certain term and like how that was why the term Hispanic came about. Like there's a lot to unpack there that I think is worth looking at. But yeah, I think like even understanding the breakdown of the census, and like we are encouraging everyone to fill it out, but I think it even like we have to teach people the why behind the action. And even like when we tell people vote, like yes, vote, but like for a lot of folks there's a distrust of that system. So if we're all collectively agreeing that yes, it is a broken system, but there is a action or there's a reason why we still have to work within the system or play within that system, then we have to be really clear about what that is. And I feel like for some folks, when they're trying to have that conversation, it's just like, oh, are you going to vote? And once they hear the no, they're ready to attack someone. And like, you're not going to get me to do shit if you're going to attack me, number one. Okay, so you got to learn how to come to me correct. Number two, it's like you have to really be able to understand like the mission here, right? Because then when folks are voting, like if they're putting all their hope on that one vote and then they don't get what they think they're supposed to get in return for that vote, then that's where the distrust continues to build. So we have to actually be very, very intentional about how we're talking about voting within our communities so that it makes sense, make it make sense. Like we were saying, make it make sense so that people feel motivated to take the action. And then there's one thing I wanted to somebody had in the comments said that we were sort of condoning looters. I just want to go back and say that that's again an opportunity to change language. I don't think anyone here, and I'll speak for myself at least, I'm not condoning. Condoning is right.
I mean, stealing is one of the, I mean, stealing in itself is like, that's what we don't like stealing, but the government steals from its people.
Right. It is about, so instead of saying you guys are condoning the looters, you can say, you know, hey, you guys maybe aren't considering how the looting really affected certain people in a way that's really deep. So that I can then politely come back to you and say, no, actually, I do understand those things. However, what I am seeing is that systemically, if there weren't all these issues that we're fighting against in the first place, we wouldn't need to worry about these folks getting the right insurance and being afraid of the security with which they'll be able to rebuild, right? Like they looted here in the Bronx pretty bad. And like, because a lot of folks like that language used felt like I was condoning, you know what I did? I got up the next day and I went to go help clean. Because great, you know what? If I'm going to stand behind the message of what I'm saying, I'm also willing to understand the layers of it. And the layer is that even though I felt that way, the person who shot, I went to go help clean, certainly doesn't agree with me, but I still am here for that person. So I'm showing up. So here I am with a broom because I understand that of how this affected you. And that's how you show up. It is a 360. It is a holistic thing. It's not just one direction that we're looking at and how we help. And we have to really think about that. So I just wanted to sort of address that because I know that that's something a lot of people feel like, oh, people are condoning. It's not about condoning. It's about understanding and reframing and then tackling from there.
Yeah, it's also even having that conversation about like why it's okay, like why it's cool if Target gets looted, because Target has that major insurance. You know, Target is a major corporation that can replace all of that stuff versus a small business who doesn't have that insurance and who more than likely didn't get a business loan from the bank to have built up and actually saved all of their shit to create their small business. One thing I am also seeing is mutual aid efforts to help rebuild Black businesses and help rebuild small businesses. That's the things that we're not talking about when we're having these conversations, is the way that the community is still showing up for these small businesses to make sure that they don't just get lost in the dust, you know? Because another thing about these looting and rioting that's going on or whatever, the looting, when we're talking about why people do that, you know, that is a lot of people's only opportunity in their minds to be able to get the things that they need. Their necessities. You know, so yeah, they do wait for that opportunity to be able to do that. And that's not, again, I'm not referring to every single person at all in any way, shape, or form. And I'm definitely not, I want it to be very clear that protesters are a separate group of people.
Exactly.
There are more than, and the majority of people there are not there to steal things. You know what I mean? Like at all. But again, when we're talking about why these circumstances create a scenario where someone feels like they can go looting, right?
Right.
We have to talk about people's disparity, man. the fact that people are in situations where they feel like that might be their only opportunity to get things that they are told they need by society.
Right.
Because also we have a society who has a lot of, you know, mainstream artists, a lot of politicians, a lot of, you know, socialites that tell everybody they're worthless if they don't have money, and they're worthless if they don't have money.
Exactly. That's what I
So
was going to
what do
say.
you think that's going to
They
be
taught
doing
us
to an
that.
uneducated populace?
You taught us to lose. You taught us that before the importance of a life comes the importance of our materialism and how we can flex. You taught us that. Like, you know what I mean? And whether or not we perpetuated that is a whole other conversation, but we perpetuated it because we were trying to make sure that we had the status as well. Everybody wants to be down. Everybody wants the status. We were following orders. Okay. So this idea that it's innate and it's because I've seen a lot of it. No, eso mono. Esos son mono que se ponen whatever, calling black people monkeys and trying to compare us to animals in the way that you were conditioned to believe, because that's another thing, a huge point. I can't believe I haven't even said this already. The whole problem in this situation is that people have been trained to be desensitized to the oppression of Black lives.
Amen.
People have been desensitized to
the
oppression
of Black lives, of Black business, of Black people.
We can see it over and over again. Why? Because our media teaches it. Because when we watch Oscar-winning movies, they're all about fucking slavery and watching us get whipped. You know what I mean? Like, because when we, you know, we're very selective about the lenses. When we wanted to introduce gangster rap, we wanted to make sure everybody knew they were criminals and didn't listen to the nuances of the lyrics, right? Like, there's just so many ways that they control the narrative, and we get spoon-fed it, and we don't know how to spit it back in their face. But they sure as hell know how to take what we try to give them and inform them with and spit it back in our faces.
Oh, really quick. I think that that's something even like in dynamics of argument. Like, I think we've all learned the way that people are supposed to argue. The way we argue with one another is to throw other things in each other's face. Like, I find that a lot of the time when I'm trying to argue with someone or about why this is a relevant movement that everyone should be, you know, in tandem with, people just love to bring up past and just be like, oh, well, they didn't stand up for me when this happened, and they were never with me when I was bullied when I was younger by Black people. And you know, because like a lot of Cubans who grew up here, of course, grew up in the poor parts of Miami, which of course are mostly comprised of people of color, you know. So when you have a white Cuban who is poor and in these neighborhoods, of course they're probably getting bullied because they're not of the same color, you know what I mean? And because these little kids' experience outside of what they're experiencing right now has been racism.
Right.
You know? So if they see someone who's not like them in their space, they're going to be racist. That is just like, it's the way that it works. Of course, it's not the same caliber of racism in any way, because there's totally different ways that systems actually oppress people versus not.
Right.
But it exists. And a huge line that we're not ever addressing is that, yes, racial disparities, but the real big thing here is rich versus poor, is money versus not having money, you know, because there's so many different subcategories in the poverty level that keep all of us from fighting each other's fight with each other, you know, that keep us feeling like each of our individual fights are different from the entire fight, which is freedom and liberation from these oppressive systems.
And that letting one win brings yours back is another thing we're taught. Like, oh, well, I'm not competition, so I can't put too much attention to that because, you know, we need to focus on this. And it's just kind of like, well, no. There's the intersections. That's a big word. Listen, for all of you guys, download that vocabulary, intersection. There's so many, because more than two things can be true. So another great word is duality. It can both be true. You know what I mean? That like,
and untrue.
Yeah, and you know, it can both be true. Like, for example, this call out culture we have, which is important. I think it's super important, but I think that once the people are called out, we haven't done a good job of making sure what the next steps are outside of canceling. How do we go beyond canceling to actually make those martyrs, right, who end up being martyrs, people who get like torn down, which for most time for good reason, but like, let's put the education behind that outside of just teaching cancel. It's
call in versus call.
You have to call in versus calling out, because there's going to be, listen, and we've, like, you know, I know I've existed in space spaces where, hell, like I've been put in corners and I'm seeing some sort of injustice, and I'm maybe it's related to work, and I'm like, fuck, if I speak out, I'm gonna fuck up this whole project, or I'm gonna bring some bad blood. And then like that might be real, and the person who's in the room who I'm not supporting in the moment is gonna remember that. 5 years might fast forward 5 years, they might be in this moment and be like, yeah, Julissa, you're supporting Black lives and you're blah, 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 blah. But I remember the time when you did X, Y, Z, and then boom, that shit's going to come out. And then what do I have to do, right? I have to be able to go back. And if I don't already know how I was wrong, I got to go back and be able to say, all right, shit, well, they called me out. How can I get called out? I'm a Black woman. This is my fight too. What did I do wrong, right? And I need to be able to really sit with that information and then move forward and be able, like a real apology. And the reason we don't always accept celebrity apologies is because you can tell they haven't done that step before coming back out and saying something. But we've all been part of groups where like one person has spoken up and been like, hey, I had a bad experience in this space and no one here advocated for me. You know what I mean? And then like, and it's like, so it feels fake to see them as advocates now. Well, make sure you've done the work so that when those people speak up, because it's valid to be called out, even when if you did something years ago, that you can actually come back and speak for the work that you've done.
Yeah, I am imperfect. Imperfect. I'm not even going to front and say that I am. I got called out plenty of times growing up. You know what I mean? Especially once I left Miami. Miami is a disgustingly anti-Black like society, like especially in the like upper echelon that I grew up in. I grew up in private school. I went to Carrollton. You know what I mean? Like it's mostly white Cubans, mostly white or upper class Hispanics. You know what I mean? Or Latinos is what it was. You know, and I was not. I was very much lower middle class, and I was on scholarship, and I had, you know, a lot of financial aid, and that was the reason I was able to be there, because I was very intelligent.
Right.
But that was why I was there, was because of my intelligence. I could not have been there socioeconomically. You know what I mean? And I felt that difference. I felt that stark contrast of my existence versus the complete disconnection from the rest of the world that these people had. You know what I mean? And the anti-Blackness that was just so, it was like water. It was like having 3 Black girls in the grade was like, what? Like they're clearly not here because they can afford it. You know what I mean? Like that was just understood. You know what I mean? In conversation. Like that was how disgusting things are and were, you know what I mean? And that's why I think right now it's just such a beautiful moment, is because we're reckoning with a lot of that stuff right now. I'm having those conversations even further with people who like will come out of their way to try to, you know, tell me something about what I'm supporting, what I'm not supporting right now. You know what I mean? It's causing those conversations. And granted, I learned a lot when I was younger. You know what I mean? When I was 16, I stepped out of Miami and I was put in a girl group, even like Normani, who was Black, you know, being around her and feeling her experience through what we went through. Like it was her experience was very different from the rest of our experience, and 100% due to the fact that she was Black, you know, and that was constantly confronted and constantly part of the conversation. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because in a lot of ways we didn't understand that struggle. In a lot of ways we couldn't even like make space for that at the time. You know what I mean? Because of what we were going through, you know, and what we were going through on a grander level, industry-wise, by the people who were in control of what we were doing. You know what I'm saying?
And I think that's important to call that out.
So, like, I
that
can't
layer of control.
or attest to her experience, because it was its own unique experience within our experience. So like that's a whole nother thing. It's like there's so many layers to this shit, bro.
Yeah, and it's so important. Like, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. You know, because I've heard those stories, and I think like even a moment like this, like you acknowledging it in a moment like this, is so big, and that's just where we have to be. Like, we just know the truth. Let's just speak to it. Speak truth to power. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of just have to have these uncomfortable moments and these conversations. Look, I had a moment with a friend of mine where he was like, wow, look at this old video I dug up from when I was in high school, and I was like reenacting a scene that he had wrote, and like it was my favorite scene, but I was like trying to be Asian, and I had my fingers like this in the video. And so like you know, and it was me literally being like, oh my God, I miss your scene so much. And I'm reenacting it, right? So it wasn't a demeaning act, but I still, like, he sent it to me and he was like, oh, haha, it looks so funny. And I was like, that's not funny, and I owe you an apology. Like, it's not funny, and I owe you an apology. And like, and it's, listen, and that's my brother, and it's fine. And like, it wasn't an experience that hurt him in any way, but I have to be able to call out those things because I need him to understand that that's unacceptable behavior from anyone else as well. you know? So like sometimes owning our own shit is so that we are leading by example.
That's the most
We are the
important
only
part.
examples we have.
Accountability is it,
Yeah.
right? Like, we really got to have that conversation. I think is like, we must take accountability, even when it's uncomfortable, even when we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're not the best people.
Right.
You know, when we don't want, like, that's the main thing, is not wanting to have to feel like a part of our character is someone who's careless, or someone who's who's not thoughtful, or someone who intentionally tries to harm people. I know that for the majority of us, of course, the intention is not harm, but the intention versus the impact is a huge part of this conversation. Just because your intention was good does not mean that you had a positive impact on the person you were engaging with. And just because you didn't do that does not make you a bad person, but you choosing to run away from accountability is what makes you a bad person. Does that make sense? It's like you choosing to run away from that and not allowing yourself to be held accountable, and reinforcing this idea that like, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. It's like, you might not want to be racist. You might not agree with those ideals, but what you said was, and what you were doing was. So acknowledging that and being like, you know what, I didn't realize before, but this behavior is racist, and I apologize for that, and I'm going to do better moving forward. That's all we can do. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, that's all we can do. But the more we run away from it, and the more we refuse to identify with it, that's where we get lost in the sauce, and all the chaos starts to come across, is because, I rhymed without even trying. But that's when it happens, is because we're so much more concerned with how we look. And how people perceive us. Than the pain that we're causing by not taking that accountability. You know, and that at the end of the day is what all Black people are asking for right now, is a fucking accountability. It's for us to see where we need to grow, to take responsibility for the parts of that are not their responsibility anymore, and to let them fucking live their fucking lives. That's it. That's all that's being asked right now, is that we stop policing communities that we don't understand.
Exactly. And then educate yourself, and then understand the issues that you're having with that community, and being able to call yourself out and to take ownership where ownership is due. And also, I think, and in that understanding that you don't get to control how people respond. You're only in control of what you can say.
To forgive you.
So if I, you know what I mean, if I say something and I, apologize, however I apologize, and I take ownership, for some people, the hurt might be deeper than what you can offer in the moment. And that's that. But you have to take the ownership, and then it's your job to lead by example and live your life by those words, as opposed to only being performative for the one moment. And that's where it comes through, and that's where it follows through. So there are people who are never going to forgive you for the shit that you did and the way that you were inappropriate. And it's not their job to have to forgive you, because that has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you. What you have to do is actually take action to the lessons that you learned. That is the ownership that you have.
And make sure that you never affect anyone like that ever again.
Yeah, exactly. Never make it so that there's another person walking this earth who is so pissed at you that they cannot forgive that hurt because you were just so damn ignorant. You know what I mean? It is that ownership, and it's understanding that. Let me say something. That lesson I learned, let me tell you, it's so interesting, because I didn't even get to be called out. I just had to see it. I had to have learned everything I've learned from the age of, I think I was 16, like from 16 to now a 29-year-old woman. And I had to see it with my 29-year-old woman eyes, and not the eyes of the 16-year-old who was just doing it because they missed their friend and they wanted to perform the favorite part of the clip of the art that their friend made that they appreciated. Even if there's innocence in that, there's problem in that, and my eyes need to see it for what it is. So I encourage folks that as things start coming up, when you get called out, look at it with your fresh eyes and your new knowledge, because your gut's going to respond with the defense of like, but this is what I meant. That's going to come up, and that's okay that comes up, but make sure that you handle that on your own, and that you're not using that to counter the person who is trying to teach you in the moment. Make sure that you are listening in that moment, and really looking at it with fresh eyes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Wow. Yeah. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot.
You said it all.
De todo.
Yes.
I feel like we have to have a reunion, like you and I.
We should.
I feel like we could talk forever, bitch.
Right. Listen, I hear Miami's more opened up than New York. I'm tempted.
Ven pa' acá.
I'm tempted. I have familia. I have a cousin down there, so I'm low-key tempted to just be like,
come through. If you come through, please let me know. I would love to see you. I would absolutely love to hang out in person and build and plot and undo together.
Yes, us undo together. And thanks for everyone who was listening. Like, we were real passionate and stuff, but these are the conversations that we need to be having. Do not be afraid to have these conversations. If you guys ever have questions on how to handle this, there's several resources. I, on my platform, my podcast at Ladies Who Bronche, we are trying to really put these conversations forward and have moments like these. So if you're really interested in like continuing these conversations or listening in these conversations, follow your Black content creators. We are
follow Julissa.
Lives. Yeah, and we're talking about our lives. Like, really what we're putting forth is a truth experience, not just the cool movie that someone's gonna write that's based on a true story. Hear the true story. Like, really show up for the moments that people are creating to share with you the information you need to get woke, for lack of a better word. So, and hold us accountable, and hold us accountable to what we're sharing and how they're problematic. It's an ongoing dialogue for us all.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yes.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Julissa. Thank you for coming on and for taking the time today. I really appreciate you and just like your perspective and your voice. You're just so brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the space. I really appreciate it.